Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that effective human resource management in multinational corporations operating in China requires a nuanced understanding of local labor laws and company policies when implementing changes to employee benefits and employment contracts. A Yum China restaurant manager is considering introducing new performance-based bonus structures and updating the terms of employment for existing staff to reflect recent operational adjustments. The manager believes these changes will improve efficiency and employee motivation. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance and maintain positive employee relations? Option A. Immediately implement the new bonus structures and contract terms as directed by senior management, assuming that operational efficiency gains will justify any potential employee concerns. Option B. Inform employees about the new bonus structures and contract terms, expecting them to adapt to the changes without prior consultation or explicit agreement, as these are presented as company-wide updates. Option C. Proceed with the changes by focusing solely on the perceived benefits to the company, without a detailed examination of their alignment with existing employment contracts or specific provisions of the labor contract law of the People's Republic of China. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed changes against Yum China's employee handbook, employment contracts, and relevant Chinese labor laws, consulting with HR and legal counsel to ensure compliance and clear communication before implementation. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed changes against Yum China's employee handbook, employment contracts, and relevant Chinese labor laws, consulting with HR and legal counsel to ensure compliance and clear communication before implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to ensuring compliance with Yum China's internal policies and relevant Chinese labor laws concerning employee benefits and contract amendments. The challenge lies in balancing the company's operational needs with its legal and ethical obligations to its employees, particularly when introducing changes that could impact their existing terms of employment. Careful judgment is required to navigate potential employee dissatisfaction, legal repercussions, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed changes against Yum China's existing employee handbook, employment contracts, and applicable Chinese labor laws. This includes consulting with the HR department and legal counsel to ensure all amendments are compliant, clearly communicated, and fairly implemented. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes legal adherence and ethical treatment of employees, minimizing risks of disputes, regulatory penalties, and negative publicity. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and fairness, fostering a positive employee relations environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing the changes based on management directives without a comprehensive review. This fails to uphold the regulatory requirement to ensure employment contract terms are not detrimental to employees and may violate provisions of the labor contract law of the People's Republic of China, which mandates that employers and employees negotiate and agree upon contract modifications. This approach risks legal challenges from employees and potential fines from labor authorities. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the changes by only informing employees of the new terms without seeking their explicit agreement or providing adequate time for review and consultation. This disregards the principle of mutual consent in contract amendments, a cornerstone of labor law in China. It can lead to disputes over the validity of the amended contracts and create an environment of distrust. A third incorrect approach is to assume that any changes are permissible as long as they are presented as improvements, without verifying their alignment with legal statutes and company policy. This overlooks the fact that even seemingly beneficial changes must adhere to specific legal frameworks and contractual obligations. Failure to do so can result in non-compliance and legal challenges, regardless of the perceived positive intent. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with understanding the objective of the proposed changes. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of the legal and policy implications, involving relevant departments like HR and legal. Open communication and consultation with affected employees are crucial. Finally, documentation of the process and outcomes is essential for accountability and future reference. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and ethically sound. Question 2. Process analysis reveals a customer complaint regarding an unusual texture in a popular menu item at one Yum China restaurant. The restaurant manager suspects a minor ingredient variation but has not confirmed the cause. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure product quality and customer safety? Option A. Immediately isolate the affected product batch. Escalate the complaint to the Quality Assurance Department for investigation, and temporarily halt sales of that specific item at the restaurant pending further analysis. Option B. Initiate a full product recall across all Yum China restaurants for that menu item to err on the side of caution. Option C. Advise the restaurant manager to adjust the recipe slightly to compensate for the perceived ingredient variation and continue sales. Option D. Instruct the restaurant manager to dismiss the complaint as a one-off incident, as it is unlikely to be a widespread issue. Correct answer is A. Immediately isolate the affected product batch, escalate the complaint to the Quality Assurance Department for investigation, and temporarily halt sales of that specific item at the restaurant pending further analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in the food service industry: maintaining consistent product quality and safety standards across multiple outlets while dealing with potential deviation. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate corrective action to protect customer health and brand reputation with the operational realities of a large franchise. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue without fully understanding its root cause or potential systemic implications requires careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that prioritizes customer safety and regulatory compliance. This means immediately isolating the affected product, notifying relevant internal stakeholders, quality assurance, operations, and initiating a thorough root cause analysis. This aligns with Yum China's internal quality control guidelines and general food safety regulations, which mandate prompt action upon identification of a potential hazard. By engaging the quality assurance team, the company ensures that the investigation is conducted by experts who understand the specific food safety protocols and regulatory requirements applicable to Yum China's operations. This approach minimizes risk to consumers, protects the brand, and facilitates effective long-term solutions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on the restaurant manager's initial assessment and implementing a localized fix without broader investigation. This fails to address the potential for a systemic issue affecting other locations or suppliers, which could lead to widespread product contamination or quality degradation. This approach risks violating food safety regulations that require reporting and investigation of potential hazards. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the complaint as an isolated incident without proper verification. This demonstrates a disregard for customer feedback and a failure to uphold the company's commitment to quality. Ethically, it is unacceptable to ignore potential food safety concerns. From a regulatory standpoint, this could lead to noncompliance with food safety standards and potential penalties if a widespread issue is later discovered. A third incorrect approach is to immediately recall all products of that type without a confirmed widespread issue. While seemingly cautious, this can lead to unnecessary financial losses, operational disruption, and damage to brand trust if the issue is indeed isolated. It also bypasses the necessary investigative steps to identify the true source of the problem, hindering the implementation of targeted and effective corrective actions. This demonstrates a lack of efficient problem-solving and resource management. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should follow a structured problem-solving framework. 1. Acknowledge and document the issue immediately. 2. Prioritize immediate risk mitigation, e.g., product isolation. 3. Escalate to the appropriate internal teams, e.g., quality assurance operations. 4. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis gathering all relevant data. 5. Implement corrective and preventive actions based on the findings. 6. Communicate findings and actions to relevant stakeholders. 7. Monitor the effectiveness of implemented solutions. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and aligned with the company's commitment to quality and safety. Question 3. To address the challenge of a customer requesting to update their personal contact information on their Yum China loyalty account over the phone, Which of the following actions best upholds customer privacy and operational integrity? Option A. Request the customer's date of birth and mother's maiden name to confirm their identity before making any changes. Option B. Ask the customer to provide their full name, loyalty account number, and the last 4 digits of the payment card associated with their account for verification before proceeding with any changes. Option C. Inform the customer that personal information cannot be updated over the phone and ask them to visit a store in person with their identification. Option D. Immediately update the contact information as requested, assuming the caller is the legitimate account holder to ensure efficient service. The correct answer is B. Ask the customer to provide their full name, loyalty account number, and the last 4 digits of the payment card associated with their account for verification before proceeding with any changes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining customer trust and the operational pressures of a fast-paced service environment. The need to balance speed with accuracy, especially when dealing with potentially sensitive customer information, requires careful judgment and adherence to established protocols. Mismanagement of customer data can lead to significant reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing data privacy and security, aligning with China's commitment to customer trust and relevant data protection guidelines. This involves a systematic process of verifying customer identity through established, secure methods before disclosing any personal information. This upholds ethical standards by respecting customer privacy and regulatory compliance by preventing unauthorized access to sensitive data. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach fails by disclosing information without adequate verification. This represents a significant regulatory failure, potentially violating data protection laws that mandate secure handling of personal information. Ethically, it breaches customer trust and exposes individuals to risks of identity theft or fraud. Another incorrect approach is to refuse to provide any information, even after reasonable verification attempts, due to an overly rigid interpretation of policy. While security is paramount, an absolute refusal without exploring alternative, secure verification methods can lead to customer dissatisfaction and may not align with the spirit of customer service, potentially creating an operational bottleneck without a clear regulatory or ethical justification for such inflexibility. A third incorrect approach involves guessing or making assumptions about the customer's identity. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It directly compromises data security, opens the door to unauthorized access, and demonstrates a disregard for established protocols designed to protect customer information. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the core principles of data privacy and customer service. When faced with a request for information, the first step is to identify the relevant policies and procedures. The next step is to assess the request against these protocols, focusing on verification requirements. If the verification is insufficient, the professional should clearly communicate the need for further information or alternative verification methods, explaining the rationale. Data security. If verification is successful, the information should be provided promptly and accurately. In situations of ambiguity or potential conflict, escalating the issue to a supervisor or designated point of contact for guidance is a crucial step in ensuring compliance and maintaining professional integrity. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that several kitchen stations are consistently taking longer than the target time to prepare customer orders, leading to increased labor costs per order. While the study focuses on time and cost savings, a manager is concerned that these delays might be linked to deviations from established food preparation procedures or potential shortcuts being taken to meet time pressures. What is the most appropriate next step for the manager to ensure both operational efficiency and compliance with China's food safety and quality standards? Option A. Immediately implement a new, more aggressive time management system for all kitchen staff to enforce faster order preparation, assuming the delays are solely due to staff performance. Option B. Focus solely on optimizing ingredient sourcing and inventory management to reduce preparation time, as the efficiency study suggests a supply chain issue is the primary driver of delays. Option C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the root causes of the delays at each affected station, cross-referencing findings with standard operating procedures and food safety guidelines to identify any procedural noncompliance or areas for process improvement. Option D. Advise the kitchen staff to prioritize speed over strict adherence to all preparation steps to reduce order times, emphasizing that efficiency is the paramount concern for the business. The correct answer is C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the root causes of the delays at each affected station, cross-referencing findings with standard operating procedures and food safety guidelines to identify any procedural noncompliance or areas for process improvement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from conflicting priorities. The immediate need to address operational inefficiencies identified by the study versus the potential for those identified issues to have implications for compliance with China's internal policies and potentially broader food safety regulations. The pressure to demonstrate quick wins and cost savings can create a temptation to bypass thorough investigation, which is professionally challenging because it requires balancing urgency with due diligence and a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and compliant response. It involves acknowledging the efficiency study's findings while initiating a parallel, thorough investigation into the root causes of the identified inefficiencies. This approach is best professional practice because it aligns with China's commitment to operational excellence and, crucially, its obligation to maintain high standards of food safety and quality. By investigating the root causes, the company can ensure that any corrective actions address the underlying issues rather than just the symptoms, thereby preventing recurrence and potential regulatory breaches. This also demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and risk management, which are fundamental to responsible business operations within the food service industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately implement cost-cutting measures based solely on the efficiency study, without understanding the underlying reasons for the observed inefficiencies. This approach fails to consider that the inefficiencies might be a symptom of deeper problems, such as inadequate training, faulty equipment, or even deviations from established food safety protocols. Implementing changes without this understanding could inadvertently exacerbate existing compliance risks or create new ones, potentially leading to violations of food safety regulations and internal policies. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the efficiency study's findings as irrelevant to compliance and focus solely on other operational priorities. This is professionally unacceptable because it ignores potential warning signs. Inefficiencies can often be indicators of systemic issues that have direct implications for food safety, hygiene, and product quality. Failing to investigate these links could lead to a gradual erosion of standards, increasing the risk of non-compliance with regulatory requirements and China's own stringent operational guidelines. A third incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes that address the symptoms of inefficiency, but not the root causes, such as simply reducing staffing levels without assessing workload or operational needs. This is problematic because it prioritizes short-term cost savings over long-term operational integrity and compliance. Such actions can lead to increased stress on remaining staff, potential for errors, and a higher likelihood of shortcuts being taken, which can compromise food safety and quality standards, ultimately leading to regulatory scrutiny and damage to the brand's reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the situation, including all relevant data and potential implications. When faced with findings like those from an efficiency study, the process should involve 1. Acknowledging and documenting the findings. 2. Assessing potential risks, including operational, financial, and compliance risks. 3. Prioritizing investigation into areas with potential compliance implications. 4. Developing and implementing corrective actions that address root causes and are aligned with regulatory requirements and company policies. 5. Monitoring the effectiveness of implemented actions and continuously seeking improvement. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and uphold the highest professional and ethical standards. Question 5. System analysis indicates that a customer has reported a potential foreign object in a food item purchased from a China outlet. The store manager is under pressure to minimize customer wait times and operational disruptions, Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and best professional practice for handling such a complaint? Option A. Advise the customer that such incidents are rare and unlikely, and suggest they may have mistaken the object, offering a small discount on their next visit as a gesture of goodwill. Option B. Dispose of the reported food item immediately to prevent any further issues and inform the customer that the item is no longer available for inspection. Option C. Conduct a thorough internal investigation, including reviewing the specific product batch records, interviewing the staff involved in preparation, and documenting all findings and actions taken while keeping the customer informed of the process. Option D. Immediately issue a full refund and a voucher for a future purchase, without further investigation, to quickly resolve the customer's dissatisfaction and prevent negative reviews. Correct answer is D. Immediately issue a full refund and a voucher for a future purchase, without further investigation, to quickly resolve the customer's dissatisfaction and prevent negative reviews. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing operational efficiency with robust regulatory compliance in a fast-paced retail environment. The pressure to quickly resolve customer complaints, especially those involving potential food safety issues, can lead to shortcuts that compromise thorough investigation and documentation, which are critical for regulatory adherence and consumer trust. The need to act swiftly while ensuring all procedural steps are followed requires careful judgment and a strong understanding of Yum China's internal policies and relevant food safety regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the customer complaint, including specific details of the product, date, time, and nature of the issue. It requires initiating an internal investigation that follows established protocols, which would include inspecting the product in question, if available, reviewing ingredient sourcing and preparation records, and interviewing relevant staff. This thorough process ensures that all potential causes are explored, corrective actions are identified and implemented, and a comprehensive record is maintained for audit and regulatory purposes. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and proactive risk management, demonstrating a commitment to food safety standards and customer well-being, which are paramount in the food service industry and are often stipulated in regulatory frameworks governing food businesses. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately offering a refund or voucher without a proper investigation. This fails to address the root cause of the complaint, potentially allowing a recurring issue to persist, which is a significant food safety risk and a violation of regulatory expectations for proactive hazard control. It also bypasses the requirement for internal record keeping and analysis of customer feedback, hindering continuous improvement efforts. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the complaint without adequate inquiry, perhaps due to perceived inconvenience or low likelihood of validity. This demonstrates a disregard for customer concerns and a failure to uphold the company's responsibility to investigate potential food safety hazards. Such an approach can lead to reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny if the issue is indeed serious and has broader implications. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial investigation that only involves a quick check of the immediate area without reviewing relevant logs or interviewing staff. This lacks the depth required to identify systemic issues or contributing factors, thereby failing to implement effective long-term solutions and potentially leaving the business vulnerable to future incidents and regulatory noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach customer complaints, particularly those related to food safety, with a structured and systematic process. This involves 1. Active listening and empathetic acknowledgement of the customer's concern. 2. Thorough data collection regarding the complaint. 3. Adherence to internal investigation protocols, which should be clearly defined and readily accessible. 4. Timely escalation of serious issues to appropriate management or quality assurance teams. 5. Comprehensive documentation of all steps taken and findings. 6. Implementation of corrective and preventive actions based on investigation outcomes. 7. Follow-up with the customer where appropriate. This framework ensures that all regulatory obligations are met, customer satisfaction is prioritized, and the business operates with integrity and a commitment to safety. Question 6. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to market expansion that balances aggressive growth targets with robust adherence to all applicable China regulatory frameworks. Which of the following best describes the most effective integration of regulatory compliance into this strategic planning process? Option A. Assume that existing compliance protocols are sufficient for all new market initiatives and proceed with expansion plans without specific regulatory review for each new venture. Option B. Prioritize achieving aggressive growth targets and revenue projections with a plan to address any regulatory concerns that may arise during the implementation phase. Option C. Proactively identify all relevant China regulations, conduct thorough risk assessments for proposed expansion strategies, and integrate compliance checkpoints throughout the planning and execution phases, involving legal and compliance teams from the initial stages. Option D. Delegate the responsibility for regulatory compliance to a separate department that will review the finalized strategic plan before its official approval. The correct answer is C. Proactively identify all relevant China regulations, conduct thorough risk assessments for proposed expansion strategies, and integrate compliance checkpoints throughout the planning and execution phases, involving legal and compliance teams from the initial stages. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and upholding stringent regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data privacy and consumer protection. China operates in a highly regulated environment, and any misstep in strategic planning that overlooks or downplays compliance can lead to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of consumer trust. The challenge lies in integrating compliance not as an afterthought, but as a foundational element of strategic decision-making. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding and proactive integration of all relevant China regulatory frameworks, including those pertaining to data privacy, food safety, labor laws, and consumer rights, into the strategic planning process. This ensures that business objectives are pursued within legal and ethical boundaries. It involves cross-functional collaboration with legal and compliance teams from the outset, conducting risk assessments, and embedding compliance checks into key performance indicators. This represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and demonstrates a commitment to operating ethically and legally, thereby safeguarding the company's long-term sustainability and reputation. It directly addresses the core tenets of regulatory compliance expected within the China operational context. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on market expansion and revenue growth without adequately assessing the regulatory implications of new initiatives. This fails to meet the requirements of regulatory frameworks that mandate due diligence and risk management in business expansion, creates a significant ethical failure by potentially exposing the company to violations of consumer protection laws or data privacy regulations, leading to legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate compliance review to the end of the strategic planning cycle, treating it as a hurdle to overcome rather than an integral part of the strategy. This is a regulatory failure because it suggests a reactive rather than proactive stance towards compliance, increasing the likelihood of overlooking critical requirements or implementing strategies that are difficult or impossible to bring into compliance. Ethically, it signals a lower priority for legal and ethical conduct. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that existing compliance measures are sufficient for all new strategic initiatives without specific review. This is a regulatory failure, as it ignores the dynamic nature of regulations and the potential for new strategies to introduce novel compliance risks. It is ethically questionable as it demonstrates a lack of diligence in ensuring ongoing adherence to the spirit and letter of the law. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that embeds compliance into the core of strategic planning. This involves 1. Early engagement with legal and compliance departments to identify all applicable regulations. 2. Conducting comprehensive risk assessments for each strategic initiative, considering potential regulatory breaches. 3. Developing mitigation strategies for identified risks. 4. Integrating compliance metrics into strategic goals and performance evaluations. 5. Fostering a culture where compliance is seen as a shared responsibility and a driver of sustainable growth. Question 7. Consider a scenario where China's HR department is developing a new internal system to facilitate performance management and employee development. The department is debating how to share employee performance data, including individual review scores and feedback, with restaurant general managers. What is the most compliant and ethically sound approach for China to manage the sharing of this sensitive employee data? Option A. Develop a comprehensive data privacy policy that outlines specific categories of performance data that can be shared, the conditions under which it can be shared, e.g., for direct performance reviews, development planning, and requires explicit employee consent for any data sharing beyond these defined purposes, while implementing access controls to ensure only authorized personnel can view the data. Option B. Implement a system where only aggregated, anonymized performance metrics for each restaurant are shared with general managers, without any individual employee identifiers. Option C. Create a broad internal policy that allows any general manager to request any employee performance data for performance improvement discussions, without a defined process for approval or oversight. Option D. Share all employee performance data, including individual review scores and feedback, with all restaurant general managers to ensure they have a complete understanding of their team's performance for effective management. Correct answer is A. Develop a comprehensive data privacy policy that outlines specific categories of performance data that can be shared, the conditions under which it can be shared, e.g., for direct performance reviews, development planning, and requires explicit employee consent for any data sharing beyond these defined purposes, while implementing access controls to ensure only authorized personnel can view the data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to regulatory compliance within China's operational context. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient internal communication and data sharing with the stringent requirements of data privacy and protection regulations applicable to China. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all data handling practices align with the spirit and letter of the law, particularly concerning sensitive employee information. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing a robust data privacy policy that clearly defines what employee data can be shared internally, under what conditions, and with whom. This policy must be informed by relevant Chinese data protection laws and China's internal guidelines. It necessitates obtaining explicit consent from employees for any non-essential data sharing, anonymizing data where possible, and ensuring that access controls are in place to limit data exposure to only those with a legitimate business need. This approach represents best professional practice because it proactively addresses potential compliance risks, upholds employee privacy rights, and demonstrates a commitment to ethical data stewardship, thereby safeguarding China from legal repercussions and maintaining a positive employer brand. Incorrect approaches analysis. Sharing all employee performance data with all managers without explicit consent or a clear business need is a regulatory failure. It violates principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, potentially contravening Chinese data protection laws that require justification for data processing and consent for non-essential sharing. This approach also poses an ethical risk by eroding employee trust. Implementing a system where only aggregated, anonymized performance metrics are shared with managers, without any individual employee identifiers, is a partial but potentially insufficient approach if specific individual performance discussions are required. While anonymization is a good practice, it might not fully address situations where individual performance feedback is necessary for management decisions, and the lack of a clear policy on what constitutes a legitimate business need for individual data remains a gap. Creating a broad internal policy that allows any manager to request any employee performance data for performance improvement discussions without a defined process for approval or oversight is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This vague policy opens the door to potential misuse of sensitive employee information, lack of accountability, and could lead to discriminatory practices if not carefully managed. It fails to establish clear boundaries and safeguards required by data protection regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, identify the specific regulatory framework governing data privacy and employee information within the relevant jurisdiction. China, in this case. Second, consult internal company policies and legal counsel to understand the nuances of these regulations as they apply to China. Third, assess the business need for data sharing against the potential privacy risks and legal implications. Fourth, prioritize data minimization, purpose limitation, and the principle of least privilege. Fifth, implement clear, documented policies and procedures, including consent mechanisms and access controls. Finally, ensure ongoing training and awareness for all employees involved in data handling. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that a China hiring assessment process involved collecting detailed candidate information, including educational background, work experience, and assessment results. A proposal was made to share this aggregated, but not fully anonymized, data with a third-party vendor for the purpose of improving the assessment platform's analytical capabilities. This vendor is located outside of mainland China. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical best practices for China in this scenario? Option A. Obtain explicit, informed consent from each candidate for the specific use and cross-border transfer of their assessment data to the third-party vendor, clearly outlining the purpose and data protection measures in place. Option B. Rely on existing internal China data handling policies, which permit data sharing for operational improvement, without seeking additional candidate consent or verifying specific cross-border transfer regulations. Option C. Proceed with sharing the aggregated data with the vendor, assuming that anonymization, even if not fully robust, is sufficient for compliance with data protection regulations. Option D. Share the data with the vendor after obtaining consent for general recruitment purposes, without specifically mentioning the data's use for analytical improvement by an external vendor or its cross-border transfer. The correct answer is A. Obtain explicit, informed consent from each candidate for the specific use and cross-border transfer of their assessment data to the third-party vendor, clearly outlining the purpose and data protection measures in place. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient internal operations with the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and reporting. The China hiring assessment test, operating within the regulatory framework of China, mandates adherence to laws such as the Cybersecurity Law, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. These laws impose strict obligations on how personal information is collected, processed, stored, and transferred. The challenge lies in ensuring that any data sharing, even for internal assessment purposes, is conducted in a manner that is legally compliant and ethically sound, protecting candidate privacy while meeting business needs. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining explicit consent from candidates for the specific use and potential transfer of their data. This aligns directly with the principles of PIPL, which emphasizes lawful basis for processing personal information, including consent, by clearly informing candidates about the purpose of data collection, how it will be used for the hiring assessment, and any potential cross-border transfer. If applicable, China demonstrates transparency and respects individual data rights. This proactive approach mitigates legal risks and builds trust with potential employees. An incorrect approach that involves sharing candidate data without explicit consent for the assessment process would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates PIPL requirement for lawful processing and consent, potentially leading to severe penalties, reputational damage, and legal action. Another incorrect approach, such as anonymizing data without understanding the specific anonymization techniques required by Chinese law, or without ensuring that re-identification is truly impossible, could still fall short of compliance if the anonymization is not robust enough, thus failing to adequately protect personal information. A third incorrect approach, relying solely on internal policies without verifying their alignment with current Chinese data protection laws, is also a failure, as internal policies cannot supersede statutory requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of applicable data protection laws, CSL, PIPL. Before any data processing or sharing, professionals must identify the lawful basis for such actions, which often includes informed consent. They should conduct a risk assessment to understand potential privacy implications and implement appropriate safeguards. Transparency with individuals whose data is being processed is paramount. When in doubt, seeking legal counsel specializing in Chinese data privacy law is a critical step to ensure full compliance and ethical conduct. Question 9. Upon reviewing the recent customer feedback regarding promotional offers, a marketing team member suggests leveraging the collected customer contact information to send out targeted advertisements for new menu items. The team member believes this is a standard practice for driving sales and customer engagement. However, there is no explicit record of customers having consented to receive marketing communications when they provided their contact details. Option A. Halt all marketing communications using customer contact information until explicit consent is obtained from each customer for receiving promotional materials. Option B. Consult with the Legal and Compliance Department to determine the specific consent requirements for marketing communications under applicable regulations before proceeding. Option C. Utilize the existing customer feedback data to infer potential interest in new menu items and send general, non-personalized promotional messages. Option D. Proceed with sending targeted advertisements, as the collection of contact information implicitly suggests consent for marketing purposes. The correct answer is D. Proceed with sending targeted advertisements, as the collection of contact information implicitly suggests consent for marketing purposes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the complexities of regulatory compliance within Yum China's operational context, specifically concerning data privacy and the handling of customer information. The challenge lies in balancing the need for effective marketing and customer engagement with the strict requirements of data protection laws applicable to Yum China's operations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all data handling practices are not only compliant but also ethically sound, maintaining customer trust and avoiding potential legal repercussions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining explicit consent before using customer data for marketing purposes. This aligns with the principles of data privacy regulations that mandate transparency and user control over personal information. By seeking consent, Yum China demonstrates a commitment to respecting customer privacy and adhering to legal obligations, thereby building trust and mitigating risks associated with unauthorized data usage. This proactive stance ensures that marketing efforts are conducted within a legally and ethically sound framework. An incorrect approach that involves using customer data for marketing without explicit consent represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates data protection principles that require a lawful basis for processing personal data, such as consent. Such an action could lead to substantial fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer confidence. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on implied consent or vague terms and conditions, is also professionally unacceptable. Implied consent is often insufficient under strict data protection regimes, and vague terms can be challenged as not providing clear and informed consent. These approaches fail to meet the standard of explicit, informed consent, exposing the company to regulatory scrutiny and legal challenges. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, such as data protection laws relevant to Yum China's operating regions. This includes identifying the specific requirements for data collection, processing, and marketing. Professionals should then assess the potential risks and benefits of each data handling practice, prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations. When in doubt, seeking legal counsel or consulting with compliance officers is crucial to ensure that all actions are in line with regulatory expectations and best practices. A proactive approach to compliance, focusing on transparency and customer rights, is paramount. Question 10. Quality control measures reveal that a new team member, during their initial training period, has been observed bypassing a mandatory data verification step when processing customer loyalty program sign-ups, citing a desire to speed up the onboarding process. Option A. Assume the new team member will learn the correct procedure over time and do not report the incident, as it might discourage them. Option B. Directly confront the new team member and instruct them on the correct procedure, without involving management or compliance. Option C. Discreetly correct the data entry yourself after the new team member has completed the process, without informing anyone. Option D. Immediately report the observed deviation to your direct supervisor or the designated compliance officer, detailing the specific action taken by the new team member and the potential implications. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the observed deviation to your direct supervisor or the designated compliance officer, detailing the specific action taken by the new team member and the potential implications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a direct conflict between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. A new employee, eager to impress and streamline processes, might overlook critical steps in data handling, potentially leading to breaches of privacy or data integrity. The pressure to meet performance targets can exacerbate this, making it tempting to cut corners. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for speed with the absolute necessity of adhering to China's internal policies and relevant data protection regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes immediate escalation and adherence to established protocols. By reporting the observed deviation to the designated supervisor or compliance officer, the employee is upholding their responsibility to maintain regulatory integrity. This aligns with China's internal guidelines on data handling and privacy, which likely mandate reporting of any suspected noncompliance. This proactive measure ensures that the issue is addressed by those with the authority and expertise to rectify it, preventing potential harm to customers and the company, and demonstrating a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves ignoring the deviation, assuming it's a minor oversight or that the new employee will learn. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the company's compliance framework. By not reporting, the employee allows a potential breach to continue, which could lead to data misuse, customer complaints, and regulatory penalties for China. This passive stance undermines the principle of a strong compliance culture. Another incorrect approach is to directly confront and reprimand the new employee without involving management or compliance. While well-intentioned, this bypasses established reporting channels and could create an uncomfortable or confrontational work environment. It also fails to ensure that the issue is documented and addressed through the proper channels, which is crucial for tracking compliance issues and implementing systemic improvements. This approach risks escalating the situation unnecessarily and may not lead to a sustainable resolution. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to fix the issue discreetly without reporting it. This is a serious ethical and regulatory lapse. It involves taking matters into one's own hands, potentially without full understanding of the implications or the correct remediation steps. This can lead to further errors, mask underlying systemic problems, and create a false sense of security. It also violates the principle of transparency and accountability in regulatory compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework of see something, say something when it comes to regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the deviation from established policies or regulations. 2. Assessing the potential impact of the deviation. 3. Following the designated reporting channels immediately, which typically involves informing a supervisor or a dedicated compliance department. 4. Cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation or remediation efforts. This process ensures that compliance issues are handled systematically, transparently, and effectively, protecting both the individual and the organization. Question 11. Examination of the data shows a customer has contacted the restaurant manager via a social media platform, expressing dissatisfaction with a recent order and requesting a refund. The customer has also provided their full name and phone number in the public comment section of the post, asking for their order history to be reviewed to verify their claim. What is the most appropriate course of action for the restaurant manager to take in response to this customer's request? Option A. Immediately access the customer's order history through the internal system and provide details of their past orders in a direct message to the customer on social media to verify their claim. Option B. Ignore the public comment and wait for the customer to contact the restaurant through official channels, such as phone or email. Option C. Publicly acknowledge the customer's complaint on social media, apologize for the inconvenience, and inform them that their request for a refund and order history review will be handled internally by the appropriate department. Option D. Respond to the customer's public comment by stating that their request cannot be fulfilled due to privacy concerns, and advise them to contact customer service via a private channel. Correct answer is C. Publicly acknowledge the customer's complaint on social media, apologize for the inconvenience, and inform them that their request for a refund and order history review will be handled internally by the appropriate department. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly resolve a customer complaint and the imperative to adhere to Yum China's internal policies and relevant regulatory guidelines concerning data privacy and customer interaction. Mishandling this situation could lead to reputational damage, customer dissatisfaction, and potential regulatory scrutiny. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data protection and compliance with Yum China's established procedures. By escalating the issue to the designated department, the employee ensures that the sensitive customer information is handled by trained personnel who understand the legal and ethical obligations. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that customer data is only accessed and used for legitimate, authorized purposes. It also upholds the company's commitment to customer privacy, fostering trust and long-term loyalty. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing and sharing the customer's personal order history without proper authorization or a clear business need would constitute a breach of data privacy regulations and internal company policy. This could lead to unauthorized disclosure of personal information, violating customer trust and potentially incurring penalties. Another incorrect approach, such as dismissing the complaint without proper investigation or documentation, fails to address the customer's concerns adequately and could result in a negative customer experience, impacting brand reputation and potentially violating consumer protection guidelines. A third incorrect approach, which involves fabricating information to appease the customer, is unethical and dishonest, undermining the integrity of the company and potentially leading to further complications if discovered. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and potential risks. This involves understanding the relevant internal policies and external regulations. When faced with a situation involving customer data or a complaint, the first step should be to assess the sensitivity of the information and the appropriate channels for resolution. Escalation to the correct department or supervisor, thorough documentation of the interaction, and adherence to established protocols are crucial for maintaining compliance and ethical conduct. Question 12. Performance analysis shows a consistent trend of minor quality deviations reported by a few restaurant locations regarding a specific ingredient sourced from a new supplier. While these deviations have not yet resulted in any reported foodborne illnesses or major customer complaints, the frequency is increasing. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for Yum China to adopt in this situation? Option A. Immediately cease using the ingredient and find a new supplier to eliminate any potential future risk, regardless of the current severity. Option B. Rely on the supplier's assurance that they are addressing the quality issues internally and postpone further investigation until a serious incident occurs. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the ingredient and supplier, focusing on identifying the root causes of the quality deviations and implementing targeted control measures. Option D. Continue monitoring the situation without immediate intervention, assuming the deviations are minor and unlikely to escalate into a significant food safety issue. The correct answer is A. Immediately cease using the ingredient and find a new supplier to eliminate any potential future risk, regardless of the current severity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Yum China to balance the need for efficient operations and cost management with its ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure food safety and prevent potential public health crises. A failure in risk assessment can lead to significant reputational damage, financial penalties, and, most importantly, harm to consumers. The complexity arises from the interconnectedness of supply chains, the dynamic nature of foodborne illnesses, and the need for proactive rather than reactive measures. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the identification and mitigation of potential hazards throughout the supply chain, from sourcing raw materials to final product delivery. This aligns with the principles of food safety regulations, which mandate that businesses implement HACCP, hazard analysis and critical control points, or similar risk-based food safety management systems. Such a system requires continuous monitoring, verification, and corrective actions, ensuring that potential risks are identified before they materialize into actual threats. This proactive stance is not only a regulatory requirement, but also a cornerstone of ethical business practice, demonstrating a commitment to consumer well-being and brand integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on immediate cost savings by reducing supplier audits. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risks associated with third-party suppliers and violates the principle of due diligence mandated by food safety regulations. Represents an ethical failure by prioritizing profit over consumer safety and a regulatory failure by neglecting essential risk management protocols. Another incorrect approach would be to only react to reported incidents of foodborne illness. This reactive strategy is insufficient as it does not prevent harm, but rather addresses it after it has occurred. Regulatory frameworks emphasize prevention, and a purely reactive approach would likely lead to significant penalties for non-compliance with preventative measures and demonstrate a lack of corporate responsibility. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on supplier self-declarations of compliance without independent verification. While supplier declarations are a component of risk management, they are not a substitute for robust internal verification processes. This approach is ethically questionable as it places undue trust in potentially biased information and is a regulatory failure because it bypasses critical control points and verification steps required for effective risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework that integrates regulatory requirements with ethical considerations. This involves 1. Identifying potential hazards and risks at all stages of the operation. 2. Assessing the likelihood and severity of these risks. 3. Implementing control measures to mitigate identified risks. 4. Regularly monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of these controls. 5. Documenting all risk assessment activities and decisions. This systematic approach ensures compliance, protects consumers, and safeguards the company's reputation. Question 13. The efficiency study reveals that Yum China's current risk assessment framework for payment processing has not been updated to fully incorporate the unique risks associated with the widespread adoption of new, integrated digital payment solutions, such as those involving QR code scanning and in-app wallet functionalities. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and compliant approach to address this identified gap? Option A. Postpone any formal risk assessment updates until a significant security breach or regulatory inquiry occurs related to the new payment methods to gather concrete examples of risks. Option B. Delegate the entire responsibility of assessing the risks of new digital payment technologies to the IT department, as they possess the technical expertise. Option C. Rely on the existing risk assessment framework, assuming that the general principles of transaction monitoring and fraud detection will adequately cover the new digital payment methods. Option D. Conduct a targeted risk assessment specifically for the new digital payment functionalities, focusing on potential money laundering, data privacy, and operational vulnerabilities, and update internal policies and controls accordingly. The correct answer is D. Conduct a targeted risk assessment specifically for the new digital payment functionalities, focusing on potential money laundering, data privacy, and operational vulnerabilities, and update internal policies and controls accordingly. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential gap in Yum China's risk assessment framework concerning the integration of emerging digital payment technologies. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not only understanding the technical aspects of new payment methods, but also their implications for financial crime, data security, and customer protection within the specific regulatory landscape of China. The rapid evolution of fintech necessitates a proactive and adaptive risk assessment approach, moving beyond traditional methods to anticipate and mitigate novel threats. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, forward-looking risk assessment that explicitly considers the unique vulnerabilities introduced by new digital payment platforms. This includes evaluating potential money laundering risks associated with peer-to-peer transfers, identifying data privacy concerns related to the collection and storage of transaction information, and assessing the operational risks of system failures or cyber attacks. This approach aligns with the principles of robust internal controls and risk management expected under Chinese financial regulations, which emphasize the need for institutions to understand and manage the risks associated with their business activities, including technological advancements. It promotes a culture of continuous improvement and proactive risk mitigation. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on historical data or existing risk assessment models that do not adequately account for the specific characteristics of new digital payment methods. This could lead to a failure to identify and address emerging risks, potentially exposing Yum China to regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and financial losses. For instance, ignoring the potential for increased transaction velocity and anonymity in certain digital payment channels would be a failure to comply with anti-money laundering (AML) regulations that require adequate risk-based measures. Similarly, neglecting the specific data protection requirements under China's cybersecurity law and personal information protection law when assessing new payment systems would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Another incorrect approach might be to delegate the entire risk assessment of these new technologies to IT departments without involving compliance and legal teams, thereby overlooking crucial regulatory and legal implications. This siloed approach fails to provide a holistic view of the risks. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with identifying the scope of the new technology and its potential impact. This should be followed by a thorough risk identification phase, considering various risk categories: financial crime, operational, reputational, legal, data privacy. Subsequently, risks should be assessed based on their likelihood and impact, and appropriate mitigation strategies should be developed and implemented. Continuous monitoring and periodic review of the risk assessment are crucial, especially in a dynamic technological environment. Collaboration across departments, including IT, finance, legal, and compliance, is essential for a comprehensive and effective risk assessment. Question 14. Analysis of the process a Yum China restaurant manager should undertake when evaluating a potential new local supplier for fresh produce, considering the supplier offers a significantly lower price than current vendors, but has limited verifiable history with large corporations, to ensure compliance with food safety and ethical sourcing guidelines. Option A. Accept the supplier's offer immediately due to the substantial cost saving, assuming their stated compliance is sufficient. Option B. Postpone a detailed risk assessment until after the supplier has been used for a period and any issues become apparent. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, including site visits, verification of food safety certifications, and evaluation of the supplier's ethical labor practices before committing to a contract. Option D. Rely solely on the supplier's provided documentation and certifications, without any independent verification. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, including site visits, verification of food safety certifications, and evaluation of the supplier's ethical labor practices before committing to a contract. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a Yum China manager to balance operational efficiency with the potential for reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. The manager must assess the risk associated with a new supplier without having extensive historical data, necessitating a proactive and thorough approach to risk identification and mitigation. The challenge lies in making an informed decision that protects the company's interests while adhering to its ethical standards and regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that goes beyond a simple cost-benefit analysis. It requires identifying potential risks across various categories, such as food safety, supply chain integrity, ethical sourcing, and financial stability of the supplier. This approach aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing due diligence, which is implicitly expected under general business ethics and potentially codified in Yum China's internal policies and any applicable local regulations concerning supplier vetting and food safety standards. A thorough assessment allows for the development of appropriate mitigation strategies, ensuring that the supplier meets Yum China's standards before full integration into the supply chain. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of future disruptions, recalls, or negative publicity, thereby safeguarding the brand's reputation and ensuring compliance with consumer protection and food safety laws. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the supplier based solely on the lowest price. This fails to consider the significant risks associated with food safety, quality control, and potential ethical breaches. Such a decision would be a direct violation of the implicit duty of care owed to consumers and could contravene food safety regulations that mandate suppliers meet certain standards. It prioritizes short-term cost savings over long-term brand integrity and legal compliance. Another incorrect approach would be to rely entirely on the supplier's self-reported certifications without independent verification. While certifications are a starting point, they do not guarantee ongoing compliance or suitability for Yum China's specific operational context. This approach neglects the principle of due diligence, which requires a reasonable level of investigation. Failure to verify could lead to the acceptance of a supplier who does not genuinely meet standards, exposing Yum China to risks of product contamination or noncompliance with local food safety laws, potentially resulting in fines or operational shutdowns. A third incorrect approach would be to delay the risk assessment until a problem arises. This reactive stance is fundamentally flawed and professionally irresponsible. It ignores the proactive nature of risk management and places the company in a vulnerable position. By the time an issue is identified, significant damage to reputation, consumer trust, and financial performance may have already occurred, and regulatory bodies may impose penalties for negligence. This approach is contrary to the principles of good corporate governance and risk mitigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in such situations should adopt a structured risk assessment framework. This involves 1. Risk identification, brainstorming all potential risks associated with the new supplier. 2. Risk analysis, evaluating the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 3. Risk evaluation, prioritizing risks based on their severity. 4. Risk treatment, developing strategies to mitigate, transfer, avoid, or accept risks. 5. Risk monitoring and review, continuously assessing the effectiveness of mitigation strategies and updating the assessment as new information becomes available. This systematic process ensures that decisions are data-driven, compliant with ethical and regulatory expectations, and aligned with the long-term strategic objectives of Yum China. Question 15. The performance metrics show a consistent upward trend in sales revenue and a decrease in operational costs over the last 2 quarters. Considering these positive indicators, which of the following actions best reflects a prudent approach to risk management? Option A. Focus solely on further cost reduction initiatives, assuming that operational efficiency inherently mitigates all associated risks. Option B. Conclude that the positive performance metrics indicate effective risk management and no further risk assessment is immediately necessary. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the risk management framework to identify any potential new or evolving risks that may not be immediately apparent in the performance metrics and assess the adequacy of existing controls. Option D. Attribute the positive performance entirely to market demand and disregard any potential internal control weaknesses that might be masked by strong sales. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the risk management framework to identify any potential new or evolving risks that may not be immediately apparent in the performance metrics and assess the adequacy of existing controls. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for operational efficiency and cost control with the imperative to maintain robust risk management practices. The performance metrics, while indicating positive trends, could mask underlying vulnerabilities or emerging risks that are not immediately apparent in standard reporting. A superficial interpretation of positive metrics can lead to complacency, potentially overlooking critical control weaknesses or deviations from established risk appetite. The challenge lies in discerning whether the observed performance is a result of genuine operational excellence and effective risk mitigation, or if it's a temporary outcome that doesn't reflect the true risk landscape. This necessitates a deeper dive beyond surface-level data to understand the drivers of performance and their associated risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment that goes beyond the immediate positive performance indicators. This entails a systematic review of the underlying processes, controls, and potential threats that contribute to the observed metrics. It requires engaging with relevant stakeholders, including operational teams and compliance officers, to gather qualitative insights and validate quantitative data. The focus should be on identifying any new or evolving risks, assessing their potential impact and likelihood, and determining if existing controls are adequate or require enhancement. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory expectations, which mandate continuous risk monitoring and adaptation. By conducting a thorough risk assessment, the organization can ensure that its pursuit of performance does not compromise its risk management framework, thereby safeguarding its long-term sustainability and compliance. This approach demonstrates a commitment to a risk-aware culture, where performance is viewed through the lens of potential risks and opportunities. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on the positive performance metrics as confirmation that all risks are adequately managed. This is a failure to adhere to the principle of continuous risk assessment and can lead to a false sense of security. Regulatory frameworks often require organizations to have robust systems for identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks, irrespective of current performance. Ignoring potential risks because metrics look good is a direct contravention of this duty. Another incorrect approach is to attribute the positive performance solely to operational efficiency without considering the potential for increased risk-taking or the relaxation of controls. This overlooks the possibility that short-term gains might be achieved by accepting higher levels of risk, which could lead to significant future losses or compliance breaches. Ethically, this approach prioritizes immediate results over long-term stability and responsible business conduct. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss any concerns about emerging risks by stating that current performance is within acceptable parameters. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to proactively manage potential threats. Risk assessment is not a static process. It requires ongoing vigilance and adaptation to changing internal and external environments. Failing to address emerging risks, even if they haven't yet impacted performance metrics, is a dereliction of professional duty and can expose the organization to unforeseen liabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that integrates performance monitoring with a dynamic risk assessment framework. This involves 1. Establishing clear risk appetite statements and key risk indicators that complement performance metrics. 2. Regularly reviewing performance data not just for positive outcomes, but for anomalies or trends that might signal increased risk. 3. Conducting periodic and event-driven risk assessments to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential threats and vulnerabilities. 4. Engaging in cross-functional collaboration to gain a holistic understanding of the business and its risk landscape. 5. Implementing a robust control environment and continuously testing its effectiveness. 6. Fostering a culture of open communication where employees feel empowered to report potential risks without fear of reprisal. 7. Ensuring that risk management strategies are agile and can adapt to evolving business conditions and regulatory requirements. Question 16. The assessment process reveals a newly identified operational risk related to a minor, infrequent equipment malfunction. While the current impact is negligible, there is a potential for this malfunction to escalate and cause significant disruption if left unaddressed over time. What is the most appropriate next step for the risk management team? Option A. Document the risk and assume it will resolve itself. Option B. Escalate the identified risk for further assessment and potential mitigation planning. Option C. Dismiss the risk as its current impact is negligible. Option D. Immediately allocate significant resources to replace the equipment. The correct answer is B. Escalate the identified risk for further assessment and potential mitigation planning. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in risk assessment where a newly identified risk, while not immediately catastrophic, has the potential for significant future impact if not managed proactively. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate resource allocation for a seemingly minor issue against the potential for future, more severe consequences. It requires foresight, an understanding of risk escalation, and the ability to justify resource allocation based on potential future impact, not just current severity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves escalating the identified risk for further assessment and potential mitigation planning. This aligns with best professional practice in risk management, which emphasizes a proactive and systematic process. China's internal policies and general risk management principles, as would be expected in a regulated business environment, mandate that identified risks, regardless of their current perceived magnitude, should be formally documented, analyzed for their potential impact and likelihood, and then subjected to a decision-making process regarding mitigation. This ensures that potential threats are not overlooked and that resources are allocated strategically to prevent future problems. This approach demonstrates due diligence and adherence to a robust risk management framework. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the risk due to its current low impact. This fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of risks and the principle of early intervention. Ethically and regulatorily, this could be seen as negligence, as it ignores a potential future threat that could harm the company's operations, reputation, or financial stability. It violates the fundamental tenet of risk management to identify and address risks before they materialize into significant issues. Another incorrect approach is to immediately allocate significant resources to mitigate the risk without further assessment. While proactive, this can be inefficient and may lead to misallocation of resources if the risk's actual impact or likelihood is overestimated. It bypasses the crucial step of risk analysis and prioritization, which is essential for effective risk management and resource optimization within a business context. This could be seen as a failure in sound business judgment and potentially a breach of fiduciary duty if it demonstrably harms the company through wasteful expenditure. A third incorrect approach is to document the risk but take no further action, assuming it will resolve itself. This is a passive and irresponsible stance. It represents a failure to manage risk effectively and could lead to significant regulatory scrutiny or internal repercussions if the risk escalates and causes harm. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to the risk management process and a disregard for potential negative consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by following a structured process: identification, analysis, evaluation, treatment, and monitoring. When a new risk is identified, the immediate step is not necessarily mitigation, but further analysis to understand its potential impact, likelihood, and velocity. This analysis informs the decision on whether and how to treat the risk. Escalation for further assessment ensures that the risk is evaluated by appropriate personnel with the necessary expertise, and that a reasoned decision is made regarding resource allocation and mitigation strategies, aligning with both regulatory expectations and sound business practice. Question 17. Research into the implementation of a new digital ordering system at Yum China restaurants reveals potential vulnerabilities in data security and customer privacy. Which of the following approaches to assessing these risks best aligns with robust risk management principles and operational integrity? Option A. Rely on the IT department's initial assessment of the system's security features, assuming that standard cybersecurity measures are sufficient to address all potential risks. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving cross-functional teams, IT, operations, legal, marketing, to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential threats and their impact on data security and customer privacy, followed by the development of mitigation strategies. Option C. Base the risk assessment primarily on informal discussions with frontline staff about their perceived concerns regarding the new system, without a structured methodology. Option D. Postpone a formal risk assessment until after the system has been fully deployed and any security incidents have occurred, at which point a post-mortem analysis can be conducted. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving cross-functional teams, IT, operations, legal, marketing, to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential threats and their impact on data security and customer privacy, followed by the development of mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient operations with robust risk management, particularly in a fast-paced consumer-facing environment like Yum China. The pressure to maintain service speed can sometimes lead to shortcuts that bypass essential risk assessment steps. Careful judgment is required to ensure that operational demands do not compromise the integrity of risk identification and mitigation processes. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for identifying, analyzing, and evaluating potential risks before they materialize. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management expected within regulated entities. By engaging relevant stakeholders and utilizing established risk assessment methodologies, the company can proactively address vulnerabilities, comply with internal policies, and potentially avoid regulatory scrutiny or operational disruptions. This proactive stance is crucial for long-term sustainability and reputation management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate operational efficiency without a thorough risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for established risk management frameworks, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by internal policies and potentially by broader industry best practices. Such an approach risks overlooking critical threats, leading to potential financial losses, reputational damage, or noncompliance with operational standards. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a single individual without a structured assessment is also professionally flawed. This lacks objectivity and can lead to biased risk evaluations. It fails to leverage the collective knowledge and diverse perspectives necessary for comprehensive risk identification, and can result in significant risks being underestimated or entirely missed. This approach is ethically questionable, as it does not demonstrate due diligence in protecting the company's interests. Third incorrect approach that involves delaying the risk assessment until after an incident has occurred is reactive rather than proactive. This demonstrates a failure in foresight and a lack of commitment to preventative risk management. It is professionally irresponsible as it prioritizes damage control over risk mitigation, potentially leading to greater harm and higher costs. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the objective and the context of the decision. 2. Identify potential risks associated with the proposed action or situation. 3. Gather relevant information and data, including expert opinions and historical data. 4. Analyze the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 5. Evaluate the risks against established criteria or thresholds. 6. Develop and implement appropriate mitigation strategies. 7. Monitor the effectiveness of mitigation strategies and review the risk assessment periodically. 8. Document the entire process for accountability and future reference. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that the current risk assessment process for Yum China's operations is perceived as overly reliant on historical data and lacks sufficient foresight into emerging threats. To address this, a proposal has been put forward to implement a new, highly automated risk assessment software that promises rapid identification of potential issues based on vast datasets. However, concerns have been raised about whether this purely data-driven approach adequately captures the qualitative nuances of operational risks and the potential for human oversight to be diminished. Considering the need for robust and compliant risk management, which of the following approaches best addresses the identified shortcomings? Option A. Adopt a hybrid approach that combines the insights from the new automated software with regular input from experienced operational managers and subject matter experts to validate and contextualize the identified risks. Option B. Immediately implement the new automated risk assessment software, prioritizing speed and efficiency, and assume its comprehensive data analysis will cover all potential risks. Option C. Continue to rely primarily on historical data analysis, supplementing it with occasional external market reports to identify potential future risks. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of all existing risk assessment methodologies, focusing on identifying the cheapest available option that can provide basic risk identification. The correct answer is A. Adopt a hybrid approach that combines the insights from the new automated software with regular input from experienced operational managers and subject matter experts to validate and contextualize the identified risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient risk identification with the potential for over-reliance on automated tools, which may miss nuanced or emerging risks. The pressure to quickly implement a new system, coupled with the inherent limitations of any single risk assessment methodology, necessitates careful judgment to ensure comprehensive and effective risk management. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial check to a deeper understanding of how the chosen approach truly mitigates potential harm to Yum China's operations and reputation within its specific regulatory environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a multifaceted risk assessment that integrates both quantitative data and qualitative expert judgment. This aligns with best professional practice by acknowledging that while data can highlight trends and potential issues, human insight is crucial for understanding context, identifying root causes, and assessing the likelihood and impact of risks that may not be immediately apparent in raw data. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes a thorough and robust understanding of potential threats, thereby safeguarding stakeholders and the company's integrity. It also adheres to the spirit of regulatory frameworks that expect a proactive and comprehensive approach to risk management, rather than a purely reactive or automated one. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the speed of implementation and the perceived comprehensiveness of a new software solution. This is professionally unacceptable because it risks a superficial understanding of risks, potentially overlooking critical qualitative factors or unique operational vulnerabilities that the software might not be programmed to detect. This can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the chosen risks are not adequately addressed, and ethical failures due to a lack of due diligence in protecting the company and its customers. Another incorrect approach prioritizes the lowest cost solution for risk assessment. This is professionally unacceptable as it suggests that risk management is a secondary concern to be addressed with minimal investment. This can lead to inadequate tools, insufficient expertise, and ultimately, a failure to identify and mitigate significant risks. Such an approach can result in severe regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and financial losses, demonstrating a clear ethical lapse in fiduciary duty. A third incorrect approach relies exclusively on historical data without considering emerging trends or potential future disruptions. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a blind spot for novel risks, such as new competitive threats, evolving consumer preferences, or unforeseen geopolitical events that could impact China's operations. This static view of risk is insufficient for a dynamic business environment and can lead to significant vulnerabilities and potential breaches of regulatory expectations for forward-looking risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape relevant to China's operations. Next, they should identify a range of potential risk assessment methodologies, considering their strengths and weaknesses in relation to the defined objectives. A critical step is to evaluate each methodology not just on its technical capabilities, but also on its ability to incorporate qualitative insights and expert judgment. The chosen approach should be one that allows for continuous review and adaptation, recognizing that risk is not static. Finally, professionals must ensure that the chosen approach is adequately resourced and that the findings are translated into actionable mitigation strategies, with clear accountability for their implementation. Question 19. Process analysis reveals that a new internal control system is being implemented across China's operations. To expedite the rollout and realize efficiency gains sooner, the project team is considering skipping the user acceptance testing (UAT) phase and proceeding directly to full integration, with the intention of addressing any discovered issues post-implementation. Which of the following approaches best upholds professional best practices and regulatory compliance in this scenario? Option A. Rely solely on the vendor's pre-implementation testing and proceed with full integration without independent validation by China's internal teams. Option B. Proceed with a phased rollout of the new system, conducting thorough user acceptance testing and validation at each stage before full integration, and addressing any identified issues promptly. Option C. Defer the integration of certain security protocols to a later phase due to time constraints, focusing on core functionality first. Option D. Bypass user acceptance testing to accelerate deployment, planning to address any issues that arise after the system is fully integrated. The correct answer is B. Proceed with a phased rollout of the new system, conducting thorough user acceptance testing and validation at each stage before full integration, and addressing any identified issues promptly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing efficiency with compliance when implementing a new internal control system. The pressure to quickly integrate the system, driven by a desire to streamline operations and potentially reduce costs, can lead to overlooking critical procedural steps. The challenge lies in ensuring that the haste to adopt the new system does not compromise the integrity of financial reporting or violate any internal policies designed to prevent fraud and errors. Careful judgment is required to identify the optimal point where efficiency gains are realized without sacrificing robust internal controls. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation with thorough testing and validation at each stage. This aligns with best professional practices in internal control and financial reporting, particularly within the context of China's operational environment, which is subject to various internal policies and potentially external regulatory oversight. A phased approach allows for the identification and remediation of issues before they impact the entire system, ensuring that the control environment remains effective. This methodical process minimizes the risk of introducing new vulnerabilities or failing to detect existing ones, thereby safeguarding financial data integrity and supporting accurate reporting. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes accuracy and reliability in financial processes. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves bypassing the user acceptance testing phase to accelerate deployment. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the principle of ensuring that systems function as intended and meet business requirements before full integration. Such a bypass increases the risk of undetected errors or control weaknesses that could lead to misstatements in financial reports, potentially violating accounting standards and internal control frameworks. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the vendor's pre-implementation testing without conducting independent validation. While vendor testing is valuable, it may not fully capture the nuances of China's specific operational context or internal control objectives. This reliance creates a blind spot, potentially allowing control deficiencies to persist. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to exercise professional skepticism, which are fundamental to maintaining an effective control environment. A third incorrect approach is to defer the integration of certain security protocols to a later phase due to time constraints. This is a critical failure in risk management and compliance. Security protocols are integral to the integrity of financial data and the prevention of unauthorized access or manipulation. Delaying their implementation leaves the system vulnerable, increasing the likelihood of data breaches or fraudulent activities, which would have severe regulatory and reputational consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to system implementation. This involves identifying potential risks associated with each stage of the implementation, assessing their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies. A structured project management methodology, incorporating clear milestones for testing, validation, and sign-off, is essential. Professionals must maintain a balance between achieving project timelines and ensuring the robustness of internal controls and compliance with relevant policies. When faced with pressure to expedite, it is crucial to communicate potential risks to stakeholders and advocate for the necessary time to complete critical control-related activities. Question 20. Which approach would be most aligned with best practices for handling customer feedback data collected through a mobile app for service improvement and targeted promotions at China? Option A. Store all collected feedback data in a centralized database with basic password protection, assuming that the inherent value of the data for business insights justifies its collection and use. Option B. Automatically collect all feedback data, analyze it for trends, and use insights for service enhancements and personalized marketing offers without explicit customer notification beyond the initial app download terms. Option C. Share aggregated customer feedback data with third-party marketing agencies to identify broader consumer trends for promotional campaigns, assuming this is covered under general data usage policies. Option D. Implement a clear opt-in mechanism within the app, allowing customers to consent to specific uses of their feedback data, such as service improvement analysis and personalized promotions, with options to manage or withdraw consent. The correct answer is B. Automatically collect all feedback data, analyze it for trends, and use insights for service enhancements and personalized marketing offers without explicit customer notification beyond the initial app download terms. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and customer trust, particularly within the context of a large food service organization like China. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to leverage customer data for business improvement and personalized marketing, with the imperative to protect individual privacy and comply with relevant data protection regulations. A hasty or overly broad approach to data utilization can lead to significant reputational damage, loss of customer loyalty, and severe legal penalties. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all data handling practices are transparent, secure, and aligned with customer expectations and legal mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice, because it prioritizes customer consent and data minimization, which are fundamental principles in data protection frameworks. By seeking explicit consent for specific data uses and collecting only what is necessary, the organization demonstrates respect for customer privacy and builds trust. This proactive stance not only mitigates regulatory risk, but also fosters a positive brand image. Adhering to these principles ensures compliance with data protection laws, which typically mandate transparency, purpose limitation, and data security. An incorrect approach that involves using customer data without explicit consent for marketing purposes represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates principles of informed consent and potentially breaches data protection laws that require a legal basis for processing personal data. Another incorrect approach, such as sharing customer data with third parties without clear disclosure and consent, also constitutes a serious breach. This can lead to unauthorized data access, misuse, and a loss of control over personal information, undermining customer trust and violating data protection obligations regarding data sharing and third-party vendor management. A third incorrect approach, failing to implement robust security measures for collected data, exposes the organization to data breaches, which can result in substantial fines, legal liabilities, and severe reputational damage, failing to meet the duty of care required by data protection regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific data protection regulations applicable to Yum China's operations. This involves identifying what constitutes personal data, the lawful basis for processing it, and the rights of data subjects. Subsequently, the framework should involve a thorough assessment of the proposed data use against these regulations and ethical considerations. Prioritizing transparency with customers, obtaining explicit and informed consent for any data collection and usage beyond essential service delivery, and implementing robust data security measures are critical steps. Regular audits and reviews of data handling practices are also essential to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes and customer expectations.